So I'm going to tell you about the day a stranger broke my heart. I had just walked into the mall. I was just running in to buy a gift for a friend of mine. And I saw this older black woman coming out of the store, and she looked really sad and kind of out of place. And I was just about to cross her path, so I decided to say hello. So I looked at her and I said hi. And she stopped, and she just smiled at me with this smile. And I realized that while she was smiling at me, there were tears actually welling up in her eyes. And she didn't look homeless or anything like that, but there was something about her that told me that she didn't have much more than the nylon bag in her hand and the clothes on her back. And she told me, she just started telling me her life story. And she told me about her newness to America, and her African accent just seized my attention, and she begged to be listened to, and so I decided that I would listen. And she told me her name was Azutata, meaning blessed, and that she was 69 and from South Africa, and without a green card, she wasn't able to find work, and that she had been on the East Coast, and she'd only been here for about 8 months, but when it got cold, she had moved to California with a friend who was supposed to help her, but she needed to buy her own food, and it was just so much coming at me at once that I actually decided, let's go sit down. So I took her over to a small bench kind of facing the food court, just in this mall area, and we sat there, and as she poured out these words, she kept kind of apologizing for saying things about unfriendly Americans, in between trying to tell me about, how tough it was for here as compared to Africa. And she also kept asking me if I was black. And she said because where she's from, often girls that look like me are from Cape Town, and their mother had been raped by a white man. And so she said this as if it was an obvious conclusion, as if there was no other possibility for my existence. And as I listened to her tell me about her life and her experiences, I was so moved, I just began to sob. And so she said to me, "You're too pretty to cry, don't cry, don't cry." And then she started to cry, and so now we're crying in the food court. And she said, "Why do you cry?" And I said, because I couldn't think of anything to say, and I just said, because you are so sad. And thank goodness I'm like a grandma, and I always have a little tiny pack of tissues with me, so I had my little pack of tissues, and I pulled them out, and I gave her one, and she just sat there with the tissue in her hand like a foreign object, and she just continued to talk to me and let the tears just stream down her face. And it was like she was used to it. And now I'm going through tissue after tissue, and at this point, I'm just listening to this woman who's just aching and telling me of how she contemplates suicide, and I'm sobbing, and all she wanted was work, and she was humble, yet she was proud, and she was mad at God for her condition, but deeply rooted in her faith that he was going to make a better way for her. And she kept saying, "And I'm not even pretty, and you still talk to me." And she spoke about her adult children she had left behind, and she actually did tell me that she had been raped in her younger years by a white man that she worked for. And I realized that she was speaking to me through this painful lens of her experience, as if I was a child that she might have had. And we went on, and maybe about 2 hours passed, and we're sitting there, and I'm crying, and she's crying, and she told me about how hard it is for her because she's over 60 years old, and she can't find any work, and she can't find anything to do. And she said, "You don't understand what this is to Africans." And she kept looking up at the mall, and she wanted me to be able to see what she saw. She wanted me to be able to see that even here, it was still better than what she could have done there. She said, "In Africa, there is no retire. I cannot sell drugs. I'm too old to prostitute. What can I do?" And her question was heartbreaking. And I just sat there, and worlds apart, but entranced in this conversation, we were sitting there in the food court. And I just started telling her about my life. And so then I pulled out my phone, and I started showing her pictures of my family and trying to kind of prove I was black. And then I was showing her, my son. I told her my son's his middle name is Okike, and it's an Igbo name. And she was totally amused that I wanted to name my son something African. And then, she hadn't asked me for anything, but I decided I need to give her something. So I reached in my purse and I pulled out what I had, and I remember I had 2 20s and $2 bills, and I just folded it up and I handed it to her, and I offered to buy her some food in the food court. And she said, well, I don't like American food. It's not food. And I said, okay, I'm going to take your money and I'm going to make a stew. And so we were just about to part, and she did something really unexpected. She waved this man over who was walking by. And she said she recognized him as being African. And so I'm like, okay. And so she pulls him over, and he doesn't know what's going on, and I don't know what's going on. And he says, yeah, I'm from Senegal. And I'm like, okay. And so they start talking, and then I'm thinking, is this some type of scam? Like, did I just completely get hoaxed, and this is a setup, And so she looks at him, and she says, thank her for me. And then he takes my hand, and he says, I know you don't know what she means, but in our country, this is custom. And when someone does something nice for you, you get an elder or someone to witness it and thank them. And so I thank you. And I had just composed myself before he got there, and so I'm like, I'm dying. And so I turn around to wipe my eye, and I swear he was gone when I turned back around. But she was standing there, and she said, God put you here today. And she said, He is going to bless you. I asked him to send me an angel. So we hugged and we parted ways. And some people just walk into your life to light you up. And she did that. And that was a year ago today, January 24th, 2014.